Here. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Courtney Cuthbertson, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at Michigan State University working on the CAPE project, which stands for Community Assessment and Education to Promote Behavioral Health Planning and Evaluation. And we're holding this webinar for you today as an introduction to the CAPE Toolkit that the technical team has been working on for a while. I will be joined for the presentation by Christina McFarlane and Deborah Bolton, who are both members of the local CAPE team. And before we get too far along here, I would also like to acknowledge our project partners, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, as well as the United States Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the RRDCs, the Regional Rural Development Centers, who are all partners in making CAPE possible, along with Kansas State University for Finney County. And several of you may have been involved in CAPE in different parts of the process. Just as a reminder here, the goal of CAPE was to develop a better understanding of where and how local leaders got their information or data about community behavioral health. And what that's meant for CAPE is collection of data from various sources, from secondary sources, national surveys, as well as a survey of community leaders that some of you may have taken, asking about behavioral health priorities in the community, sources of data that leaders are familiar with, and some other questions. CAPE has also engaged in a series of webinars about behavioral health issues and different topics of interest. As part of this last component that the toolkit is a part of, we have the packages to communities, and there is our project website there, healthbench.info/communities.html, where you can find the full extended profile report for Finney County, as well as the behavioral health snapshot that is available. And you can also see what's been going on in the other communities that have been involved in the project. As part of the packages for communities, we have been working on the CAPE Toolkit. So this is a product of the CAPE technical team, and the goal of the toolkit is to provide resources for different community behavioral health issues for the leaders in the community. So the toolkit is organized primarily by community behavioral health issue, and I'll give some examples of that. The technical team put a lot of thought into how to organize and the toolkit, what to include. So the toolkit it started out being largely community-based programs, things that communities could enact. It also, at this point, includes a couple of clinically based things, some school-based programs, and we decided as part of the technical team to include programs at different levels of evidence. So there are some programs which are referred to as evidence-based, which generally means there has been some sort of peer review process relating to research around whether a program is effective or not effective. Often a category is called emerging or promising when there is some evidence that a program is useful or is able to lessen behavioral health issues, but maybe hasn't gone through the peer review process yet. Then there are other programs and interventions that we have included that are untested but sound like things that communities may be interested in trying. So the different areas for the CAPE toolkit, these largely map onto the different behavioral health areas that were represented in the survey. And we did also include a couple of additional areas that came out in some of the qualitative response questions to the survey. So we see, and if you might remember from some of the findings from the Finney County CAPE survey, alcohol abuse and illegal drug use, as well as teen pregnancy, were the issues that came to the top in terms of the most people indicating that they were priorities. So alcohol abuse, illegal drug use, and teen pregnancy are all in this, as well as things like non-medical prescription use, PTSD, school and work absenteeism. Some of the categories that were added in as a result of the qualitative response questions on the survey include Alzheimer's and dementia, as well as bipolar disorder, child or youth mental health. And there were some programs or interventions that the technical team couldn't quite fit into these categories but felt they were important to include. So we have 2 additional categories here: other at-risk youth and then other mental health. The CAPE Toolkit at this point is an online searchable database. The searches can use keywords, or you can search using categories. And just as a tip, I do have the web address here, and we can do a live search in just a second. But just as a tip, the search will be more successful when it is less restrictive. So when you are using fewer terms, we tried to provide several different categories to be able to search by. And if you were to select all of those, the search engine would come up with fewer and fewer results. So in order to see a broader range of potential programs or interventions that may be useful in Finney County, my recommendation would be only to look by the behavioral health concern or issue. So this is what the screen looks like when you go to that website. I'll go back for just a second in case there's anyone who didn't catch this URL. It's www.ncrcrd.msu.edu/ncrcrd/search. So if you click on that, you should come to a page with a kind of a light green background. And as you scroll down, you'll see this screen with an introduction to the CAPE Toolkit. We do also make reference here to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices. The shorthand for this is the NREP database. This is a database that has over 300 different interventions, and these have been proven to be effective. These are things that evidence has shown have been effective, and they have also been evaluated by SAMHSA. And so SAMHSA is essentially vetting them through this NREP database and saying, yes, we've evaluated the evidence. We do find there's reason to believe these are successful programs. These are programs that can help to deal with different behavioral health issues. So we would encourage you to use that database as well, to add that into your own list of resources. Then the actual search tool is down here. This name category, we are working with our IT team to rename this keywords. So if there was a certain keyword you were interested in, you could type it into this box and click on the search button down here. You can see the different search categories or possibilities. So there is condition, which is the behavioral health issue. So that long list that I showed you before. That included alcohol abuse, alcohol-related automobile accidents and deaths, illegal drug use, etc. You can select gender as male or female. You can select age, and we've limited this to adults or youth programs. We have different race categories here. Location, which is referring to urban or rural. Type of program. What's the level of intervention? So is this something that happens at the community? Is this family? Is this individual? And then setting here. So what's the setting in which this program or intervention would take place? So we have a few examples to show you, and then we can do a live run of the toolkit, and we can take any questions you have, maybe do a few test runs for different behavioral health issues. So one example of something that you'll find in the toolkit is the Mental Health First Aid Program, and this was founded in Australia in 2001. It now runs in over 23 different countries. Mental Health First Aid is an 8-hour training program geared towards community members in general on the topic of mental health literacy. So the idea that the founder had was that, gee, there's more publicity going out, and we know more now about how to identify someone who may be experiencing a heart attack. And we know about what to look for if someone might be experiencing a stroke. But what if they're experiencing a mental health crisis? How do we understand those symptoms, and how can we create mental health literacy so that people in the community will know how to spot those symptoms and those signs? So, as part of this 8-hour training program, the mental health first aid will train the community members to recognize different signs of mental illness and substance abuse. It goes through specific information about issues like suicidal ideation, depression, different substance abuse issues, psychoses. So recognizing the signs of specific mental illness and substance abuse issues, being able to assess the risk of suicide or self-harm for an individual who may be experiencing a crisis. It trains community members to be able to listen non-judgmentally to someone who might be experiencing mental illness or substance abuse issues, and also educates them to be able to provide information or encourage help-seeking behavior for those people who might be experiencing a mental health or substance abuse issue. The Mental Health First Aid Program has been proven effective in a number of settings and for a number of things. So it's been proven effective in terms of the ability for individuals to recognize mental disorder. It has changed different beliefs about treatments, including stigma. So it has destigmatized or worked to decrease those kinds of social distancing that may happen between community members and people who experience mental illness issues. It has worked to increase confidence in providing help in general as well as in workplace settings, increase the amount of help that's given, and this program has also been found effective in doing those things among ethnic minority groups in Australia. Specifically, that study was looking at Vietnamese subgroups in Melbourne, Australia. So I will let Christina talk about another example.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Christina McFarland and I'm with Compass Behavioral Health, and we were a partner in this initiative with the CAPE project. And one of the things that I was going to focus on today is talking about one of the resources there with the Toolkit, and that is SBIRT, which is an acronym, we love acronyms, right, for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. And so as Courtney was talking and discussing, there are many resources on the Toolkit, and the search URL is listed there. I'm not sure how to go ahead and move to the next screen.
Oh, yep, I can help there.
Okay, I'll just say next screen. So with screening and brief intervention and referral to treatment, this is one of those evidence-based practices that Courtney had mentioned earlier. It has been developed through the World Health Organization. It has been studied in 6 different countries, in many different settings and cultures, and has been found to be very effective in identifying people with harmful alcohol consumption. And that's important to differentiate between addiction or abuse. This really is a preventative measure. It was developed to be utilized in medical settings primarily, although it has been used in several different settings effectively. So the purpose again is to catch that alcohol use when it's being
Oops, I think we might have lost Christina for a second. Are you still there?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So to kind of back up, I'm not sure where you lost me here, but basically, again, to look at making a brief screen. If interventions are warranted, those are very brief interventions that are done in the context of either a medical setting or behavioral health setting, or school setting, wherever that may be. And then also to look, does a further referral need to be made if that assessment is determined to indicate a more severe problem. So again, this is more prevention. This is something that has been initiated in several different states, including Kansas. We've been making a very concerted effort in the Finney County and Southwest Kansas region to start implementation process of SBIRT. Again, you can see the picture there depicting you know, tools that are used for blood pressure. As Courtney had mentioned with the mental health first aid, it's a hope that these types of screenings would happen on a universal basis, meaning that just like with blood pressure, you get that taken every time you go to the doctor, that screening for alcohol use would be initiated on a regular basis, at least annually, maybe more often with more at-risk populations such as adolescents, so that would be happening regularly to try and intervene earlier in that process. Next slide, please. So here is again just a screenshot of that behavioral health programs database that Courtney had listed before. That URL is on that first slide that was shown. Go ahead, next slide. From there, you can, if you put in alcohol or alcohol abuse, screening tools, or it comes up under several different search engines. You'll come up with this countyhealthrankings.org, and it takes you to a site, and this is again a screenshot of that site, and it lists information about alcohol screening and brief intervention. There are also several other resources listed on that page. And if we go to the next slide. Another site that's listed is the Integration Health Solutions, which is again through SAMHSA, and SAMHSA has devoted a whole subsection to SBIRT, and again to the screening and brief intervention. And so if you go on to this particular link, there is a great amount of information available about the practices, about implementation, about tools. There's tips on that, about what SBIRT is about, and some different information that can be helpful to agencies or communities that are looking to implement. So this is just one example of one of the resources available on the toolkit, and so this is something that as you go through, one site will then lead you to other sites, will then lead you to other resources. I don't know if, Courtney, are we taking questions just at the end in regards to the whole thing, or are there questions now about this?
If people have questions as we're going, feel free please to share those in the chat box that's over to the left. We can take them whenever people might have questions. We can wait till the end if that's easier.
So again, this is just one example of many that are on there, and I think Deborah also has another example of another resource available on the toolkit.
Okay, so it's my turn. Okay, welcome to all of you, and thank you for participating in this project, this webinar. I want to tell you that we began the process in applying for this funding to do this research about last January, and so we're kind of winding down the process, and we're hoping that the strategies and tools that you will find on the toolkit, on the help on the website will be useful to you. And if you have any questions in using those for yourself, please let us know. I thought that I would just highlight one thing that we've done with the website, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Well, first of all, it's called How to Reduce Your Child's Risk of Depression and Clinical Anxiety, and it's strategies for parents of primary school age, and then there's also strategies for older children, and those are all very useful. It's at www.parentingstrategies.net /depression / and then I think they have, then you can find both of those little toolkits there. And in working off the kind of snapshot that we had of Finney County, Kansas behavioral health snapshot, you can, if you use that tool, you can see the top 10 Finney County health priorities. And one of the things that we looked at is stress, adult depression, youth depression, and high school dropouts as the symptoms of overarching. And since I work with immigrant families a lot, I thought I would just talk about how we use the strategies for preventing and reducing the risk of depression. But the health concerns that we were looking at in a situation, if you were doing this in a logic model, we see that immigrant families are usually at risk, have been at risk for behavioral health concerns. And usually strong families can be weakened by these issues, especially when you consider that long work days for parents don't leave time for child and parent interactions. And one of the other things that we've seen is those long work days in perhaps agricultural related work that's very labor intensive, tend to isolate the parents. So parents are isolated, they're working long hours, usually in language environment that mostly speaks in their language, so they don't have a lot of opportunities to use and learn English. And we see that it's isolating because it doesn't help them bridge to the larger community. So acculturation can be a risk there, and that social isolation can work to break the families apart. And then I was just looking at the participants. I think you're all understanding what I'm talking about, especially when you're working with a lot of families in educational settings, in health service settings, in a lot of those settings. Finney County is extremely lucky because it has the Finney County Community Health Coalition. And that coalition is represented by more than 200 representatives from at least 100 different agencies. So it has a lot of opportunity to talk about the issues as it relates to the constituents in each of those partner agencies. So just to kind of pick up on what we're doing in extension, but we're not doing it alone because it requires a lot of interaction with other agencies. So in Finney County, we're really we're fortunate to have the Health Coalition. So anyway, one of the things we start off with is the Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program. And it kind of becomes a cohort because when the families have been through that, then they want to really understand child development processes and issues. So those same parents might go through the Incredible Years, which is part of Russell Child Development Center and KCSL and the Health Coalition. And then it might move, the same families might move into self-management of chronic diseases. That is a program called Kansans Optimizing Health, and the Spanish version is Tomando. But then they might move into bilingual bicultural 4-H, which incorporates the parenting strategies found in that resource booklet put out by the University of Melbourne, which I had referred to and given you the web address for. One of the most important things that we do here is we see the parents as the stakeholders, by assuming that we have to go beyond what the community leaders think about the families that they're serving. We have to go beyond what the educators think about what the families they're serving. So we do a lot of engage in multilingual research because all of the stakeholders become involved then, and we can ask them directly what challenges you the most, especially where behavioral health concerns are an issue. So then as we start to look at the outcomes of combining all those things with that parenting strategy, incorporating those strategies, we see that the parents are reporting increased autonomy and for themselves and their children. Letting go, I put letting go a little bit of that because a lot of times we would see that parents were not wanting their children to do certain things like stand up and do a report or a demonstration speech in 4-H, for example. So we see the parents reported that in their own families they were seen as leaders, and the families started to combine again as we had them in all of those different interventions that I was showing you in the previous slide, those different interventions there. And then they felt like they had renewed strength in handling everyday stressors after the social isolation seemed to fall away because they were finding more and more people in similar communities and then bridging to other communities they were feeling. And then those new connections offered an emotional support system. So we're seeing a lot of good outcomes using those parental strategies and again combining parents and having them as their self-spokespeople for the issues in their families. So that, oh, and I'd like to ask one thing. I'm not sure what the evaluation that would be set up, but if any of you have a chance before you sign off today, I'd like you to list at least one thing that you'll be able to use after the webinar today from both what Christina and I talked about. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you. All right, well, let's dig into the toolkit. I'm going to switch our windows here. So does everybody now see a screen with what looks like that green background and the CAPE logo? That toolkit visible on the screen now?
I still see the database, programs database. Is that the one you wanted us to see?
Right, yes. So this is a live feed now. So I'm actually in my web browser, and you can see up here I'm highlighting the web address ncrcrd.msu.edu/ncrcrd/search. That will bring you to this page. And as I mentioned, we scroll down here, and this name is for keywords, if you have any keywords that you would like to search by. As I mentioned before, you're going to have the most successful search when you search by condition. So is there a particular condition that you might like to search for? Anybody who's in the audience today? Thanks, Edward. I'm not sure what the issue is there with the echo. Okay, we got one vote for alcohol abuse, so I will click on that. So if we scroll down here, we can see that the second issue that it brings up here, it says vigorous enforcement of existing underage drinking laws and minimum legal drinking age. So the way that this pulls results is to show you the name of a program or an intervention, to give a description of what that is. So in case this is a little bit small, this one says it's enhanced enforcement programs. Initiate or increase the frequency of retailer compliance checks for laws prohibiting the sale of alcohol to minors. And it goes on. Then the next paragraph is relating to any evidence base. Oh, screen might have gone away there. Is it back now?
You're good, Courtney.
Okay, sorry about that. So as I mentioned, this first is the name. Then we have this description of the program. Then there is evidence of effectiveness if we found any. So there is some strong evidence that these enhanced enforcement laws prohibiting alcohol sales to minors reduces retail sales to minors. And then there is the inclusion of a web address so you can find more information on that program. So as we scroll down here, each bullet point represents a different program or intervention, and we can see there are quite a few here for alcohol abuse issues. We see here, for instance, there's mental health first aid, which I spoke about a little bit before. They have provided specific guidelines for alcohol use problems. So if I was to click on this, it would load up. It will load up the actual PDF about alcohol use problems. My internet connection is a little bit slow, but here we go. Maybe we can see this loading. There we go. So mental health first aid, a PDF helping someone with alcohol use problems, and it's got different suggestions here. Approaching someone about their drinking, how to do that, encouraging someone to change their drinking, reducing risks that are associated, encouraging other supports. So there are web addresses here that are very helpful in finding more information about these programs. And we have a question from Verna that asks, is there a direct link to SAMHSA's NREP database? Yes, there is. So if we're looking here at the description and the introduction, here's a paragraph about the NREP database, and there is a link right here. The web address is www.nrep.samhsa.gov, and I will type that into the chat box now so you can all have that. So you can click on that here, and it will pull up that search database. The way that I usually like to access this is to click on the tab that says View All Interventions. And there are many categories on the side, age, area of interest, setting, and so on, that you can click on to find different programs. So if we click on areas of interest, we can see substance abuse prevention. So why don't we click on that and click on search. And here I see one that's called Alcohol Literacy Challenge. So you can click on each of these, and it gives a very in-depth description of what the program is, the terms under which this was found to be effective, different outcomes. So this had outcomes related to alcohol expectancies, alcohol consumption. The ages that this was used with were 13 to 25. Much more in-depth information here about those programs. So are there any questions or any other searches that you would like us to do? Okay, well, I'll do another one really quickly here. So one that I mentioned that was added on was this other at-risk youth. Christina, did you have a question or something you wanted to bring up?
Well, I'm just wondering wondering, Courtney, if individuals out there, if there are leaders in the community that have other resources that they are currently using or have utilized in the past that would be, again, evidence-based or new emerging, is there a way to get that onto the database? What would be the kind of course of action if they have something they would like added to the toolkit?
Sure. The best course of action at this point would be to send me as much information about that as you can. I'm putting this PowerPoint back up for a second. So I have my email address up here. It's cuthbe16@msu.edu. If you know of a resource that is very helpful or one that is evidence-based that you think should be added, then please send that to me and I'll see what we can do to get that added in.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, since we have a couple more minutes here and I don't see questions yet, I will just show you very quickly this other at-risk youth category. We have things like the Youth America hotline. So this is a hotline that teens can use, and they're talking to their peers, they're talking to people their age. We have things like this, preparing your young children for a healthy drug-free future. And this is a PDF file from the Massachusetts Clearinghouse about how to keep children from alcohol and drug use. The It's Your Sex Life campaign is something that was run by MTV about trying to reduce unintended pregnancy, trying to prevent STDs, including HIV and AIDS. They claim great success, although this has not been evaluated through peer-reviewed research. Oh, it says my name is still up. Sorry about that. So can you see the screen again? Okay, I'll run through this really quick. So other at-risk youth, and always make sure you click the search button there to have the screen pop up. So the Youth America hotline here is the first one. They do have a website that is accessed here. I also mentioned here the It's Your Sex Life campaign. This is the one that was run by MTV. The Preparing Your Young Children for a Healthy Drug-Free Future is a little bit higher up. And then there's also inhalant abuse training, which is from the New England Inhalant Abuse Prevention Coalition. So there's a lot of different resources here that we hope will be useful. And as Christina was mentioning, if there's another resource that you know of, I would love to add that in, so please let me know. Are there any questions? And Deborah mentioned that it is important to remember that local organizations have a great deal to offer their own communities, so staying connected locally is important. So I would urge you to make sure that you get in touch with local organizations and see what they might know about and what they might be able to offer. Edward asks, are these slides available and also a list of the links? Yes, so the HealthBench website, you can see healthbench.info right here. This is the website for the CAPE project. This webinar is being recorded, so it will also be available on the healthbench.info website under that Communities tab. I will make sure that the PowerPoint slides as well as the recording of this webinar are available there. Thank you for the question.
Can anybody put a little note on something that you've possibly learned today so we could know what kind of, if we've had any impact just on presenting the information, so we can report that?
Verna says that she learned about the Toolkit site. Edward says the information and all the links are valuable for the community to help with a community needs assessment and seeking grants for the future. Wonderful.
I'm also wondering, Courtney, can you download the chat history and send that to us as well?
Yes, that will definitely happen right after the webinar is concluded. Great. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, I want to thank you all for your participation today. We hope that this is a useful resource, and if there are any questions in the future as you're using the toolkit, please feel free to get in touch with me and send any questions my way. I'm happy to take those. So I hope you all have a very nice afternoon.